Question 8. Proponents of the electric car maintain that when the technical problems associated with its battery design are solved, such cars will be widely used and, because they are emission-free, will result in an abatement of the environmental degradation caused by auto emissions.
So that's a bit of a monster of a sentence. There's a lot of ideas there. So just to parse it out, we know people that like electric cars or the proponents are saying, hey, when we fix the technical problems, people are actually going to start driving our cars. One of the main reasons people don't drive cars or electric cars is the limited battery they have. Whereas like if you want to drive cross country, you are not going to make it in an electric car. You're going to have to stop and charge it, which takes some time. And then up until recently, my family actually had a Nissan Leaf when I was growing up, and it could maybe go like 80 miles before you would have real issues. And that's fine if you're commuting around a town. If you're like driving anywhere though, you got real issues. So, okay, that is a problem. But then our proponents say that when we solve that, that is just going to cause an abatement of environmental degradation. Is everyone immediately just going to switch over to electric cars? What if they're expensive to buy a new electric car? What if people are stuck to their old ways and they don't want to give up their gas guzzler? We seem to just assume that this is the only thing preventing everyone from driving an electric car. And to me, that seems like an assumption that we just have not proven.
But unless we dam more rivers, the electricity to charge these batteries will come from nuclear or coal-fired power plants.
Yeah, I mean, that's also a conclusion I would take issue with. I'm like, what about solar? What about nuclear? But if they use this as a premise, we don't get to argue with it. And I think they're going to support some other idea. But they are saying, hey, like electric cars are nice. However, they're not clean. They're not like emission free. We're still going to have to get the electricity from somewhere. And much of the electricity we produce and consume does not come from clean sources. And hence, technically, we're not going to get rid of all the emissions because we're just shifting them. Instead of gasoline being burned up and released into the atmosphere, it'll be nuclear. Oh, we actually did mention nuclear. It'll be nuclear or coal-fired power plants, which presumably have damage. I don't know. I'm kind of objecting to the nuclear, but okay, sure. They're not as clean as we would hope.
Each of these three power sources produces considerable environmental damage.
So yeah, that's just kind of what I was thinking ahead with, which is like, hey guys, the electric cars are not perfect for the environment. They might still be a step up because this might be less emissions. Like, yeah, maybe electric cars are better than gasoline, but it's not zero. We still have some production of pollution or what's the word? Carbon dioxide that could be
Emissions.
causing. Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah, because the proponents are like, there's going to be an abatement, and basically the author's like, not so fast though. Like, here's some other issues to charge the battery.
right.
Um, and then it ends here with, thus the electric car blank.
Well, I would just say, I mean, here we just want to fill in the blank, not really add anything new, just complete what they were saying. I would say it will not eliminate emissions because we don't say whether or not it's going to be like a bad thing. Like we don't say, therefore, the electric car will be worse for the environment. We're just saying it's not perfect. We're not going to fix the problem with this. There's
Mhm.
still other things we need to address.
Yeah, it's not everything is magically solved. Like, there still can be some environmental issues here based off of the emissions. So they ask us, and we already know what they're asking us because we had thus the electric car blank. It's just fill in the blank. But they're saying, which of the following most logically completes the argument? Which one fills in the blank? And whenever there's a blank, we fill in that blank, right? Before we look at the answers, which we've done. So A says, will have, thus the electric car will have worse environmental consequences than its proponents may believe.
Yeah, so it's not exactly what we predicted. We said it will not eliminate emissions, but eliminating emissions is what the proponents had said. So we can kind of, this is analogous to A, because A is saying, hey, the proponents think that the electric car will result in an abatement of environmental degradation. That's a way of saying eliminating emissions. We know it's not going to do that. And because it's not going to do that, we are going to have worse environmental consequences. So to me, A actually looks pretty good. I don't see anything to nitpick A on.
All right, so we'll keep that. B says, thus the electric car will probably remain less popular than other types of cars.
Well, we don't know that. Maybe even with the environmental damage, people will still drive these cars. We say it won't have the solution that we had hoped for, which is this lowering or elimination of fossil fuel production, I guess. But how many people are actually going to drive them? People might still drive them. We're just saying it's
Yeah,
based on a mistaken belief.
they could, like, what if the government subsidizes them or something and they become really popular? We just don't know. C says, thus the electric car requires that purely technical problems be solved before it can succeed.
Yeah, I mean, a few issues. The big one is that's not what we were talking about. Like, we do briefly mention the technical problems and then launch off of it, but we want to make this argument make sense. And this would be like that does not connect to the prior couple sentences before our blank. Um, Further, like it is technically true. We do acknowledge that technical problems are an issue, but the bigger issue is like we launch off of that into the emissions. This is all about our electric car is going to be a solution for like pollution. And now
Yeah.
he's going back to like the science behind the engines or like the batteries. I'm like, okay, but that's not what we were talking about throughout our whole passage.
Yeah, here when they say, and also succeed is really vague. Do they mean succeed like just on the market? I'm inclined to think that's what they mean here. And if that's what they mean, really whatever way it means, it just again, we're concerned with the pollution that it's going to cause, not whether like the car then will be successful commercially or whatever.
Right.
D, thus the electric car will increase the total level of emissions rather than reduce it.
Yeah, I'd say that also goes too far. We know it's not going to fix the problem, but we never quantify whether it will get worse or better. We just know it
Mhm.
won't be zero. There will still be some emissions, but that emissions could still be less than what we had initially, but maybe it's like 50% of what gasoline powered cars were producing. It could
Yeah,
also be 110%. Like D is possible,
it could
but
be true, but
it's
yeah.
information we don't have. And that's a problem enough on these ones where we are trying to find something that is supportable. And D, when we say increase, that's new info.
And then finally, E, thus the electric car will not produce a net reduction in environmental degradation.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite of E. Once again, that actually seems pretty likely to be true, but likely to be true is not our burden of proof here. It is what is supported. And so it's like it could produce a net reduction. It could go from 100% of like emissions down to 50%. We're just saying we have not eliminated the what's the word? The pollution or emissions. And hence there could still very well be a net reduction. It's just not going to go to zero like the proponents think it will.
Yeah, the reduction, exactly. The argument is sort of leading us to think here that if there is to be any sort of reduction, it's just not to the extent that these proponents think it's going to be with this
Yeah,
abatement of the emissions.
because maybe driving electric cars is better than driving a gas car. I think that's true based on what I know, which is that an electric car is not perfect, but it is more efficient than using gasoline. That's a net reduction still. It's just not the reduction that our proponents had hoped for, which is that they're emission free. Hence, we're going to have literally no environmental degradation. And that goes too far because what our argument then says is, wait a sec, we still have to get this power from somewhere, and these sources are not clean.